Welcome to the fourth and final video about reading a case on Westlaw. I realized too late that probably a better name for this would be navigating a case on Westlaw, but it's too late to change that now. In particular, in this video, we're going to look at how to use the filters that are part of Keycite when looking at a case on Westlaw. After that, we'll do at least one, maybe two videos on validating your cases using all these different things we've looked at in the last few videos. And then finally, we will get to actually finding cases on Westlaw. Now, for this part, I'm going to use a case we didn't look at earlier in the other reading cases videos. I'm going to use a case called International Shoe versus the State of Washington. This is a very, very well-known case. It was decided in 1945, and every law student has to read it. It deals with the issue of a court's personal jurisdiction over a defendant in a civil lawsuit. I'm using it because it's been cited over 100,000 times, which will give us lots of room to play with the filters. Here I've moved to the Citing References tab. What we're going to concentrate on in this video is everything over there to the left, those are filters, and the last two columns on the right, the depth column and the Headnotes column. And I'll explain what those are in a minute. The other columns we're not going to worry about right now. You have the treatment column, which we'll talk about in the validating videos. And then the other columns I think are fairly self-explanatory, and we'll talk about those briefly in just a moment. I'm going to go live on Westlaw now, so fasten your seat belts. It's going to get bumpy. Filters have a tendency to act kind of strangely. They don't always have the same thing happen twice. So let's just keep our fingers crossed. So here's our document, International Shoe versus State of Washington. And you can see here are the tabs, and here's the Citing References tab. You'll see it tells you there's over 100,000 different items that have cited International Shoe. Now, if you want to, you can hover over that and pick a category. So if all you wanted to look at is cases that have cited International Shoe, you could just go right from here and pick cases. I'm kind of old-fashioned. I just prefer to click on the tab. And now I get the same choices over here on the left without doing it right here as part of hovering over the tab itself. So let's look a little bit at what we've got here. On this bar here, it tells you your in citing references, that there's over 100,000 currently listed because we haven't filtered any yet, that there are up to 20 documents on each page, and if you want to change that, you can go down here and change it to 50 per page or 100 per page. I just like to leave it at 20. Here is how they're sorted. Now, the first four on here happen to be cases, but that's because I've chosen depth as my method of sorting. I know you don't know what depth means. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but you can either sort them by depth with the documents with the most depth first or the least depth first. Can't think of a single reason why you would want to put the least important documents first, so I just leave it at the highest. Or I could choose to have the newest documents first or the oldest documents first. It's a matter of personal preference. Over here, where it says no items selected, detail level menu, I have chosen the intermediate, which gives me the case name and site and just a little blurb about what the case is about. But if you want to choose less detail, you can do that, and you'll get just the case name and citation for each of the documents. Or you can pick most detail, in which case you'll get the case name and site and the little blurb about what the case is about, plus a little bit of right around the first time it's cited International Shoe. I just happen to prefer the medium So I'm going to change it back to that. Now the first thing you pick when choosing how to filter is which category of materials you want to look at. For this video, we're only going to look at cases and then briefly at secondary sources. So I'm going to click cases. And now you'll see on this bar we're down to the 30,250 cases. And I still have them sorted by depth highest. If I change this, you'll see that when sorted by depth, the most recent case listed was decided in 2017. By changing it to the date, the newest first, the first thing listed is a case from this year. But I'm going to leave it on depth for now. Before we begin playing with the filters, let's briefly talk about depth of treatment and what the depth of treatment and headnote columns are about. Depth of treatment is about how deeply the citing reference discusses the document that you're key citing, in this case, International Shoe. So for example, you may have cases that merely cite International Shoe, or they may mention International Shoe. Some might mention International Shoe with maybe a sentence of commentary about it. Others may spend a whole paragraph talking about International Shoe, and others may spend a page or several pages discussing International Shoe. Now, obviously, when you're doing your research, it really doesn't help much to find cases or documents that merely mention it or merely cite it or only spend less than a sentence discussing it. What you're looking for is an in-depth analysis of International Shoe. And so the depth of treatment column gives you some idea of how deeply the citing reference analyzed International Shoe. So the little green blocks that appear in the depth column under citing references tells you how deeply the citing reference discussed International Shoe. The more green blocks there are, the more discussion there was, or the more analysis there was. So here you can see how these blocks are defined. One is a brief reference or citation only. 2 blocks means there was a little bit of discussion, but less than a paragraph. 3 means substantial discussion, more than a paragraph. And 4 blocks means extended discussion, more than a page. So if you're really looking for case law that has analyzed International Shoe, you want to find the ones that have 3 and 4 blocks. You're not really interested in the others. Now let's talk briefly about what the Headnotes filters are about. If you remember Headnotes from when we covered them in the print materials, you might have a case that has any number of headnotes. Let's say you have a case that has 50 headnotes, and it's really what's discussed only in Headnote 34 that you're interested in. So then you go to Keycite the case, and you find, let's say, hypothetically, there are 20 cases that have cited the case, but only one of them discussed what was in Headnote number 34. That narrows down the number of those cases that you have to look at closely, because only one of them discussed the issue you were interested in. And that's what the Headnotes filter does for you on Westlaw as part of Keycite. It allows you to find the cases or other documents that have cited the case you're interested in with respect to just those parts of the case that you're interested in. Because a case can have many issues in it, and there might be just one of those issues that is important to you. And so you can use the Headnote filters to find the later cases that discussed your case with respect to that one issue. Now let's see where those depth indicators and the headnotes come into play. Here on the right, you'll see that we have a column called depth and a column called headnotes. What this is telling you is that for these first 3 cases here, all 3 discussed international shoe at the greatest depth because there's 4 green blocks. The headnote column is telling you that these cases, let's say the first case, discussed international shoe with whatever was the issue or the point of law in Headnotes 3 and 6 in international shoe. The second one was about the issue or point of law that was discussed in Headnotes 3, 10, and 11 in international shoe, and the third one in 3, 5, and 11 international shoe. So if you were primarily interested in what was discussed in Headnote number 11, you'd want to look at the second and third one. If you were interested in what was discussed in Headnote 6 in international shoe, you'd want to look at the first one. If you were interested in what was Headnote 19 in international shoe, none of these really discuss that issue, so you could skip them, at least for the beginning of your research. Well, now I'm going to make another executive decision and change the plans again. I had intended to demonstrate the use of the filters in this video, but it's already 11 minutes long, and so I'm going to stop there. In the next video, I will demonstrate how the filters work.